Okay, you are listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor here on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHMWPPM. Today on the program, we'll be joined by City Controller Christy Brady. Chris Murray will join us to preview the upcoming Philadelphia Eagles season. Our own Lance Haver will provide an update to the water rate hikes, and Denise Clay-Murray will interview Steve Sattel of Philadelphia Legacies. Packed show tonight, so we're going to get started with our interview with City Controller Christy Brady. City Controller Christy Brady, thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome. I'm happy to be here.
So before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about what the Controller's Office does for people who may be not sure yet?
Absolutely. So the Controller's Office promotes honest, effective, efficient, and fully accountable city government. And we do so by providing independent analysis to city officials. We're providing objective information to city officials, the public, to you, other interested parties, about financial affairs and on ways to improve city operations and how we use our public resources.
And with that in mind, I'm always really interested to hear about, how does an office like yours make a decision as to what you're going to investigate or how you're going to address a problem or concern?
The way I've been doing it, some of it is charter mandated requirements. We do the audit of the city's financial statements, the school district's financial statements, but I
All right, we appear to have some kind of technical difficulty here. That is our interview with City Controller Christy Brady, and it's hopefully going to come right back on. I'm not sure what the issue is, so I'm trying to find that out. But the City Controller's Office is one of those offices that people, I think, don't always know exactly what it does, which is why we like to talk to the controller about, hey, what happens here? How does it work? They do a lot of audits, a lot of reviews of city agencies. They always do a good look at the budget, and they do certain things, a lot of things like that in order to make sure the city's running smoothly and effectively. And I think we got it working again.
am utilizing a community affairs unit, and we're going out throughout the city and pretty much listening to people's concerns, but that's also helping me collect data on what I should look at. I want to look at what will have the biggest impact on our citizens, with an emphasis on accountability and public safety, because that's what I think people are most interested in.
Yeah. And one of the things that we're always talking about is the economy and how what the city can be doing. And your office recently released a report about outdoor dining.
Yes.
And this was really interesting to me. So what were some of the key questions there that you were asking and some of the key things you were taking a look at?
Well, we conducted this review after the business community and city council, while I was testifying, raised concerns over the complex process for obtaining an outdoor dining license. So one of the things that I wanted to do was to determine what barriers, if any, prevented businesses from fully utilizing this outdoor dining experience.
And, what were some of the key recommendations that came out of that report? Because there were a couple of things that seemed like common sense things that were backed up by data here.
Yes. So what we found was that the application process needed to be streamlined. We found that restaurant owners had to go to different departments to obtain different approvals. And not only that, but there was a very high fee to apply for an outdoor dining license. $1,750. It's way too high. You can compare that to other cities like Pittsburgh, which is $150. And I believe that it was preventing, a lot of these streeteries decided to take down their walls because it was very complicated, high fees, and it just wasn't worth it to them.
And you had mentioned streamlining, and that I think that can be said about a lot of things in local government, and really a lot of things just in general. But
Yeah.
when you make a recommendation like that, do you have a thought as to how do you begin that process of saying, okay, we're going to streamline this process, we're going to make it a little more accessible? How does that work, and what kind of recommendations do you make to like an agency or multiple agencies?
Well, in this case, seeing that the mayor has come in and has split L&I. So we have the building construction, and then we have quality of life. And I believe that some of the things that I'm seeing are steps in the right direction. I think in order to make change, sometimes these reports, it's about getting city council or the mayor, the policymakers, to want to implement those recommendations. And it is an issue being an auditor.
Mhm.
I take many CPE classes for my hold my CPA license, and there's a lot of how do you get management to implement your recommendations. It's not just a problem here. I mean, that's an audit problem. I mean, we take courses on it. It's about winning management over to say, yeah, you're right, and gaining that trust too. Because if the department thinks you're out to just get them, and they're not going to listen to your ideas. But if I've worked for the city almost my whole life, and I've developed relationships with the commissioners and directors, and all the way down to a lot of lower level employees, just because I've lived in the city all my life. And I believe that they know me, and they know that all I want to do is improve how government works.
One of the key things we talk about on this show a lot is the city budget process. So, what
Hmm.
what is your office's role in that?
Well, we issue an opinion on the city's 5-year plan. And what that is we look at the assumptions that they use to make their projections, and we determine if it's reasonable or not.
And so when you look at the budget that was just passed, we look ahead a little bit and we see these declining fund balances. Does that
Mhm.
give you cause for concern?
It does. It's a very aggressive budget. I think that there's a lot packed in, and seeing that there was no taxes um, being raised, it was tax neutral. Um, you know, it does cause concern. However, the city is doing well. I mean, just recently, we were upgraded to an A+ for bond rating. That helps us borrow money. Our interest rates are going to be lower. And a lot of that has to do with how healthy our pension is.
Mhm.
Our pension is 62% funded right now. We're projected to be 80% by, I think, 2028, and fully funded by 2033. When that happens, the money that we're putting into our pension fund can be used for so many other programs, and it's being recognized. So I do believe that the city is going in the right direction.
Once we get over that pension hump, then it becomes a little easier, it
And it's a
sounds like.
big hump. It's a big
Yeah.
hump, but
Mhm.
we're working hard on the pension board to have this fully funded. Mhm.
All right. I'd like to bring in Denise Clay-Murray here on Philadelphia Hall Monitor.
Hi, and thank you for joining us. We really
Hi,
appreciate it.
Denise. You're welcome.
I guess my first question for you is, should you said that in your report that the streeteries
Yes.
thing could be streamlined. How can it be streamlined? And a lot of the businesses that wanted to do that also had money as a concern. Is the streamlining would a more streamlined process make it less expensive to do?
I think it's two things. One is the fees and the insurance, so the costs that are involved. We compared how other cities did this. And I mentioned Pittsburgh being 150 application fee. Ours is 1750. That's just incredibly wrong.
Excuse me, $1,750?
Yes, yes.
Wow.
That's how much we charge. Now, New York, you could pay a fee and it's for over several years. Maybe so we're trying to, so this report it contains options that the city can use to determine, because when city council goes back in session, we want them to use this as a tool to decide how best to go forward with streeteries.
Okay, now, one of the things that I've always noticed about the controller's office is that you all come out with these really great reports that look at a problem that the city is having, and you give suggestions on how that problem can be solved. Once you submit the report to city council, do you ever do like kind of a follow-up to find out if they're even thinking about using these solutions?
Yes, we do a follow-up. When I was running last year, I was able, I don't normally run with the people I audit. And I developed relationships with the city council members and the mayor. So I believe I have a good working relationship with them. I'm glad that they came to me and asked me to do this report. And I believe that they will use this as a tool to move forward, as well as many other of their initiatives that I'm working hand in hand with them on. And I'm looking forward to seeing what we can do together.
Okay. Now, you had to sign off on the budget in terms of PICA, and how does the controller's office and PICA interact, and what gave you the confidence to sign off on the budget? Because one of the things that a lot of folks are concerned about is the fund balance in year 5 and how small it is. So what made you confident enough to say, okay, I can get behind this?
One of the things with the 5-year plan, as it goes out, what happens in the future doesn't always, it's less predictable. So the immediate 1 year, 2 year, 3 year is more important than when it goes out into the outlying years. It's harder and harder to predict. We do look at those assumptions. So our job is to look at the assumptions. We work very closely with PICA, who brings a lot of the key departments in and asks them a lot of questions on their budget line items. And we also work very closely with the city's budget office to understand their assumptions, do our own calculations and our own projections to see if what they're putting in the 5-year plan is correct. So one of the things that I did point out in the 5-year plan as a sensitive assumption was the fiscal cliff with the ARPA funds, which is one of the reasons why we do have such a drop in revenue going forward.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us. And I'm going to give you back to Larry McGlynn. And you're listening to Philadelphia Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5.
All right. Thank you, Denise. And Controller Brady, before we let you go, what I really recommend people go to the website and take a look at these reports. Not only are they informative, but I find these very easy to read. They're well written, and I think it's easy for somebody. And I was an English teacher. I'm not a math person, so the numbers get a little confusing for me sometimes. But these are easy to understand. Can you give us a preview of anything that might be coming up in the fall?
Absolutely. So first, I would just want to point out that monthly we do data releases. It's a newsletter called Municipal Money Matters. Say that 5 times fast. But and just recently we issued one on public safety departments and worker compensation claims going down. We've done business tax, comparing business taxes within the city and immediate areas right outside the city. One of the things that we're going to be issuing in the fall is our performance audit on L&I, and I'm really excited about that. Again, public safety, one of my initiatives. Of course, our annual audit, our departmental audits, the city single audit. We're always working. We're trying to work hard for the citizens of Philadelphia. That's for sure.
Well, we definitely want to back when that L&I report comes out. Go ahead.
Yes.
Now, is the newsletter accessible to the public? Can you subscribe to it?
Yes. Thank you very much for asking this question. On our website, you can sign up for our newsletter, and you'll receive this newsletter once a month, and it'll contain the Municipal Money Matters. All of our reports are on our website, and I encourage everyone to come and onto the website and to view our reports.
Absolutely. People who are interested in municipal government should definitely be getting these emails because they're really interesting and well done. City Controller, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it was wonderful. Anytime, please.
All right. We'd like to thank City Controller Christy Brady for joining us as always. She'll be back with us again soon. And now I'd like to bring on Denise Clay-Murray. Denise.
Hey, Larry, how are you? Good morning.
Good. How are you tonight?
Everybody. I'm good. I'm good.
And now I'm going to bring on somebody you may know. Hall Monitor sports correspondent Chris Murray. Who we can't hear.
Who we can't hear.
Wait a minute. Okay.
There we go.
Yay.
All right. So Chris, we got to get right to it. I got to know, are the problems from last year at the end of the season fixed coming into this year? And we're muted again here.
You're still muted.
No. We're not
I'm
hearing.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep, there we go.
Now we can hear you.
Okay. If they say so, let me say that. I mean, first of all, they have a new offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore, and according to everybody at training camp, Jalen Hurts is picking up the new offense, and he's added more responsibilities, some of which that Chelsea and Curtin is calling on the line calls again, blocking the. But this, a lot of talk, but we got to see it in the game. I mean, I can tell students theoretically how to do something and how to, I don't know, learn comma rules of all things, but I got to see it in the paper, just like you guys see it on field and whatnot. And, apparently Jalen Hurts has gone through training camp not throwing an interception, but that's practice. The thing is, you guys show it during the game. I was listening to Vic Fangio on the defensive side. Vic Fangio is basically said it was a rather really short press conference in the sense that he didn't say much about the defense. It's like wait and see when they get down to Sao Paulo, Brazil, and start playing the game. And so the Eagles have improved themselves. They picked up Saquon Barkley last year for the offensive running game. They picked up Jahan Dotson from the Washington Commanders to be the third receiver, which, like I say, on paper makes the Eagles look really good. And so from that perspective, they look good on paper, but we got to see it. They didn't get any reps in actual game competition during preseason. They went by the two team practices that they had. I'm not convinced until I see it on the field and with live bullets, so to speak. They have to basically show what they can do. So, they say everything is great in La Land, but in Eagles land, but they've got to show it on the field. They've got to prove it on the field. They all, everybody's, singing Kumbaya right now. But what happens if if their third down conversion rate is like 0 for 4 in the first half? Then that's what we're going to see and all that. So on paper, they're a good football team. I will say that, but I'm not so, but we have to see it, on the field. And they're playing against the Packers team hungry after their run through the playoffs last year.
Well, let me ask. The Eagles are playing in Sao Paulo, Brazil on Friday.
Yes.
Brazil, when I think football in Brazil, I think the little white ball with the dots on it, not
Yeah.
the long ball here in America. Can you talk a little bit about the NFL and the fact that for some reason it's decided it's going to go international and that the Eagles have been asked to do? I mean, let's face it, Philadelphia is known for having, the Eagles are known for having the rudest fan base in the country. Why would you want to import that? Why
Well,
would you want
maybe
to import
I,
that?
I I I don't know, but what I do know, the NFL, like the NBA, I suspect they want to know if they can find talent outside of the U.S. I mean, that might be my only theory, but I don't know about Eagles fans being in Sao Paulo. Although I think Brazilian soccer fans are a lot more. How can I put it? A lot more exacting when their teams lose. I've heard cases where athletes were shot and whatnot because someone lost the game. So I do find that interesting.
How much are the Eagles going to miss Jason Kelsey?
I think they're going to miss his leadership, and they're going to miss the fact that he, knew all the line calls, blitzes, because he was responsible for a lot of that too. And he was, and so from that perspective, he's going to be missed, I think, right, and especially in the early going, especially if Cam Jurgens, doesn't not, has to go through a period of adjustment and everything. So from that point of view, from that point of view, that's where they're gonna miss his presence and his leadership out there. Cam Jurgens has to find his own voice.
So what do you predict for them this year? Are they going to at least make the playoffs? Will they go back to the Super Bowl? Will Jalen Hurts have to move out in the dead of night, like the Baltimore Colts did when they left Baltimore for Indianapolis?
Now,
Because
see, you triggered me on that. Now, see, why you had to mention that? You've triggered me there, man. I mean, but no, I mean, I predict, in all seriousness, they're going to have a good year. I think Jalen Hurts, if anybody is determined to prove that last year, and he didn't have that bad of a year when you think about it, he didn't have that bad of a year in the sense that he won those first 10 out of those 11 games. He won those games. He had a comeback against Kansas City, comeback against Miami, had a comeback against the Buffalo Bills in overtime. I mean, he won a lot of those games, man, and he won it on a bruise a bruised left knee, and so he was hurt most of the year. I just think what happened was the offensive coaches didn't have anything late in the season when teams adjusted to what they were doing, and and the thing about it, Jalen Hurts not being able to handle the blitz, to me, that's on the coaching staff to adjust and to guide him into fixing that. But if everything is what they say it is, I think they'll have a good year. They'll at least they're gonna run the ball a little bit more with Saquon Barkley. I think the real question is the defense, because, like I said, I was listening to Vic Fangio's press conference, and the thing that struck me was he has all these guys out there. He has his lineup. He knows who can play and all that. But the thing is, I don't even think he knows what's going to happen with his defense. A lot of these guys aren't his guys, and whether or not the team has internalized the defense well enough to stop Jordan Love and the Packers offense with Josh Jacobs, now they have a running game. That's going to be the real test in this game. And like I said, the Packers are starting to believe in themselves. They believe that if a few breaks had gone here and there, they might have been in the NFC Championship game last year. And at the end of the day, the Eagles have to prove. And the thing about it is gonna come back to Jalen Hurts. It's gonna come back, and I think he'll do it. I mean, I'm predicting that he's gonna have a big year, and that he's gonna prove to everybody, because a lot of people says he's regressed and this, that, and the other, and I don't think that's the case. Like I said, you don't win games the way he won games last year, and you're that bad. Yes, he struggled late in the season. The whole team, the defense struggled late in the season because that coaching staff really failed to make the adjustments and put guys in the right position. So that's my thing. I mean, people got mad at Jalen Hurts for seeking advice from other coaches, but I'm not mad at him for that, in a sense that maybe he didn't trust the coaching staff, but maybe sometimes you want to get an outside perspective of what you're doing and what teams are seeing, and that's the thing that at the end of the day, that you have to look at, that I think Jalen Hurts is the type of guy who's gone through so many different systems that he can adjust, and he's going to do. But that's the variable in that situation, is that I think he's going to bounce back. I think he's going to have a year where he bounces back from his situation. I think he's eager to prove that last year, the late season last year, was a fluke and everything else, and so that's how I see it.
15-2.
15-2. Well, that could be. 15-2. I don't see 15-2. I see maybe 13. I see 13-4 or 13-4 or 14-3. That's how I look at it.
They're going to lose. Go ahead.
I just wonder if the Fabergé egg that is Saquon Barkley, who continues the tradition of Penn State running backs that end up hobbled earlier in their career rather than later.
He's done better than others, though. He's done better than others.
Has. I mean, in Saquon's defense, if I have to defend Saquon, he did play for a Giants team with a horrible offensive line, and sometimes I think he'll be a lot better. The pressure's not all on him, but the Eagles have so many weapons in the offense and whatnot, between AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert and Jahan Dotson, that it's like pick your poison. But I hope they run the ball a little bit more. That said, because I think not running the game late in the season killed them, and that enabled teams to basically pin their ears back and blitz.
That's how you win.
Yeah. And you basically, I don't care if they say, "Oh, it's a passing league." You know what? I as a former running back in a previous lifetime, I basically said, you know what? The best way to keep defenses off your opposing quarterback is to wear them down with the running game and all that. They'll think twice about blitzing when they get whacked by a 6'5" lineman, offensive lineman. So that's what you have to do in those situations. You have to basically run the ball. You have to run the ball in this situation. I think they'll do it. I think they'll come up with a lot of balance this year.
Denise, what do you think the record's going to be?
10-6.
Whoa.
You mean 11-6, 17 games?
Yeah, 11-6. I mean, I'll give them that. I mean, what people have to remember about me is that I view football, basketball, and hockey as annoyances I have to get through to get to baseball season. So I pay attention, but I don't pay that much attention. I mean, now if this were like a question about Bryce Harper's durability for the season, I could answer that better. But
well, and not to make this anything other than this, but we have to be honest about this. Denise is a Raiders fan.
Yeah,
we just have to put that out there. I don't understand that, but anyway. Yeah. Chris, thank you so much for coming on to talk to us a little bit about this. It's always fun to switch it up a little bit and talk about sports with you. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate you all being here. I'm sorry. I'm sitting in the backseat of my mother's car right now, so I'm just so I'm just sitting here and whatnot, and and I have to thank people for putting up the window so I can talk to you guys. But I'm always appreciative of you guys coming on the show and everything. And I mean, me coming on your show. I'm sorry, So I appreciate you guys anytime. Hey, one of these days, you'll let me talk politics with you guys.
All right.
All right.
It's a deal. All right.
And
Chris
by the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to hear more insight on sports from Chris, he's on every Saturday on WURD 900 AM, 96.1 FM, the Chris Murray Report from 11 to 1. And
great show.
I'm actually going to be a guest on Chris's show this week. We're going to be talking about 76th place and the reports that were issued about that this week.
Yep. All right. Well, Chris, thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. And now we'd like to bring on Hall Monitor consumer reporter Lance Haver.
Good evening.
Lance, how are you tonight?
I'm all right. You're not in the Philadelphia tradition. You're all optimists about the football season.
Well, I am. Not so much Denise.
She didn't say Jalen Hurts going to get hurt and not be able to finish the season and they'll fall apart. So I thought that was optimistic.
Well, no, I actually like Jalen Hurts.
I love him.
Because I followed his college career and all the stuff he went through in that paradigm and saw, okay, well, this is a kid that's actually got, he's got a sense of strength. And that's always good to watch. Mm-hmm. It's just that, sometimes the Eagles fan base makes me want to throw things at it. And like, for example, you probably saw the bus ad that had Kamala Harris as the preferred candidate for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, everybody knows that Kamala Harris is a fan of the San Francisco 49ers. Granted, that's her bad taste, but we can't, knock her from it for it. She's from Oakland and the Raiders suck. So that, of course, it makes sense. But, some of the reactions that got told me this is why I didn't necessarily want Jalen Hurts to come here. Because, why play for a group of people that if you have a bad game, they may say something really foul to you that makes folks like me want to punch him in the face,
Mm-hmm.
But, I want him to do really well because if he does well, the team does well. If the team does well, that's good for the city. We get tourism money. People come in and stay in hotels and eat food and give tax ratables to Philadelphia. And just for that, between the Eagles and the Phillies, if the mayor took my idea of withholding all of our possible state taxes and using the money on what we need, the Eagles and Phillies alone, because of their postseason stuff, could make it so we had like a bunch of new schools, perfect roads. SEPTA would be like the best transportation center and the best transportation organization in the country and the whole bit, but no one will take my suggestions.
That's why you should run.
Well, I do think an analysis of what it means when the Phillies are in the playoffs and when they're having a good year in terms of attendance and the taxes on the tickets and the taxes on what's sold in the stadium is really an important issue. And, as we talk about later on, we're going to talk about the 76ers stadium and the economics of that. You have to look at what they're saying and do they really predict that there'll be a winning team every year? And they do, and that's kind of not necessarily true. Anyway, I certainly am out of my league talking about sports, so I will talk about what I have in expertise is, and it's not nearly as much fun. Those of us who are opening up water bills this month are going to come in for a surprise, and that is it's going to be a 12% increase. This is the fourth year in a row that the rates have gone up, and there's no sign that it's stopping. The mayor has reappointed the water commissioner, who has been the one proposing the rate increases. He has refused to have a management audit done at the water department. Now, management audits are a tool for utilities to use to try and find efficiencies. Like I think Denise was saying earlier, sometimes when you bring or no, I think it was Chris who was saying, sometimes when you bring someone in from the outside to look at what's going on, you get a different perspective and you get some ideas. The water department hasn't had a management audit in a quarter of a century. They've refused to combine services with the other municipally owned utility, Philadelphia Gas Works, PGW. They have an incredible amount of cash. They do call it a rate stabilization fund, and I always have to laugh when they have a bunch of money in the bank and they give it a fancy name so no one understands what it is. And just to add insult to the $125 million they have that they can take out tomorrow instead of the rate increase, is not even in a credit union or in a bank that employs people in Philadelphia. So if they took that money and they put it into a credit union, at the very least, they would be recirculating the money for mortgages, for car loans, for small business loans. But they're not. They send it to U.S. Bank. U.S. Bank has no presence in the city of Philadelphia, other than obviously a great lobbyist, because they're also getting money. They're getting so much cash that it's hard to understand who they are and how they have that contract. So the situation is complex in that the water department continues to say it's not their fault. But it's really not that hard to understand that if the water department continues to get all of the rate increases it wants, it has very little incentive to change its behavior. And change is difficult. I don't want to make light of that. Changing how you do something, improving it, not continuing to do what you've always done are challenges. But it's not working for the average Philadelphian. This will be, again, the fourth rate increase. And that's because the water department refuses to change. We also have some questions. A great report was done on their Philadelphia Water Department's green program. And it's not clear whether that's really working or not. Other cities have come up with different ways of dealing with wastewater. Philadelphia has a unique way of doing it, and hopefully we'll have a report on that in the weeks to come. But that doesn't come up in any of the rate cases. What we've seen is the hearing examiner refuses to allow those issues to be raised. So in the last rate case, it wasn't allowed to ask questions about how efficient the low-income plan was. Wasn't allowed to ask questions about what efficiencies were possible. Wasn't allowed to ask questions as to how much money really has to be in the water department's bank account. And the hearing examiner continues to say, well, we're going to do that in the next rate case. But the next rate case, they're going to say, well, we can't look at that now because the rate board, which is comprised of 5 people, the former water commissioner, the former chief legal counsel for Philadelphia Gas Works, a real estate developer, an investor, which is another fancy way of saying speculator, and a former consumer advocate. 4 of the 5 people on that board represent the commercial interests in the city. And obviously having the former water commissioner who hired most of the staff at the water department decide whether the staff is doing a good job or not is ludicrous. So those are the situations that we face. And then the only saving grace has been an independent advocate to represent ratepayers. But the corporate controlled rate board has taken care of that. They have hired an advocate, and the advocate doesn't have any connection and doesn't represent the public. And that's not my words. The chair of the water rate board that sets the rate wrote down in one of his decisions that the advocate has no representation of the public. They serve the rate board's interests. The rate board hires them without a public hearing, without public input. There is no analysis by the public. There is nobody from the public who is sitting as a client. The rate board tells the advocate what the contract's going to be and doesn't require the advocate to talk to the public. So, concrete example, in the last rate case, the advocate agreed with the commission to have it be virtual. And what that means is people who want to protest can't show up with signs. People who want to talk to other ratepayers and build an organization that's going to fight against rate increases can't do it. The Zoom is a very careful tool for the water rate board, because when you challenge something on Zoom, all they have to do is turn your mic off. You can't talk to other consumers. You can't talk to other people. You can't make the connections that you would make in a public setting. And certainly someone sitting in their home doesn't feel the pressure in the same way that someone sitting in a room with 50 people or 100 people holding up signs saying, "Don't overburden us," would feel. And so the advocate supported keeping all of the hearings virtual and making sure that the public was shut out. Now, the water department is owned by the city of Philadelphia, and we've already talked about and we've seen that privatizing it is not the solution. There is no question that if it was sold, rates would go up. And in Chester right now, one of the things that the person who's been in charge to overrule democracy in Chester is saying is he wants to sell Chester's water department. And of course, if he does that, what it will be is the most regressive form of taxation imaginable. Instead of finding a fair tax to pay for Chester's needs, he would sell the water department to a private buyer. The private buyer would then raise rates, and the additional rates would be a tax, and that tax would go to solve the problem, Chester's problems perhaps, but it would be a tax based on a very basic necessity of life, water. It would be the same as if the controller, the person who's been appointed to overrule democracy in Chester said, well, we're going to tax food in the supermarket to pay for Chester's mistakes, and we're going to tax water to pay for Chester's mistakes. That would, of course, would never be allowed, but selling the water department to someone who's going to raise rates is seen as a possible solution. So I'm hoping with city council coming back into session, I'm hoping the timing is perfect, that every city council person who's getting a water bill is going to open it up and look at it and go, well, something's wrong here. We really ought to investigate why we continue to have rate increase after rate increase after rate increase. Now, I think the water department knows that. I think the water rate board knows that there's going to be some scrutiny because the public PICO is asking for a rate increase of a similar amount, 12%. And their own advocate, the rate board's own advocate says, well, that's unconscionable. People aren't going to be able to pay it. Now, the advocate that's hired by the water rate board says 12% rate increase in water bills is a good idea, but it's a bad idea when PICO does it. So the way that the water department is keeping this information separate from the public is they haven't updated their webpage. So they've made no public announcement that rates are going up. So people are going to open up their bills and look at it. It's going to be higher than normal. And there's going to be only a handful of people who are going to read through the decisions and find out why their water bill is up another 12%. Hopefully the council staff members will open up those bills, look at them and go, something is wrong here. We really have to find a better solution.
Now, has anyone thought about suing the water department? Because if I'm getting a rate hike of 12 to 14% every year, and I'm looking at my water bill, and sometimes the water, isn't the best water it can be, I'm thinking maybe I should, get a group of my neighbors together, file a class action suit, and say, we've had about enough of this.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's, again, one of the reasons why the rate board decides to keep the hearings on Zoom. Because if it was public, if people went to a room, they could have those discussions, they could sign up for a class action, there would be an opportunity for people to get organized and speak out. But by making sure it's virtual, by keeping the public away from the proceedings, it makes it much harder to get the organization you're talking about. So there, again, the advocate serves as the apologist. The advocate that's hired by the rate board says, we don't need public hearings. We don't need to inform the public. We don't need to bring the public out to these hearings. The virtual hearings are enough. There's roughly 600,000 households in the city of Philadelphia, roughly 600,000 water consumers. 12 people testified. They think that's a good percentage.
When is the next water rate board hearing, meeting, whatever they wish to call it?
So they meet monthly in the middle of the month. The September one looks to have been postponed. So I don't have the date for October. But when I'm next on, I will make sure I have those dates. But the real question is, anybody who's upset about their water bill, will you call your council person and say, can you help? There's really just no excuse for allowing this to continue to happen. Over 25 years without a management audit is just not acceptable. And the water commissioner himself comes out of the utility structure. He understands what it means. He understands what a management audit will do. In fact, when I had a chance to talk to him, question him, he said, yeah, he likes that idea. But again, any audit, anybody looking at what they're doing is going to see the waste and mismanagement. It's going to make recommendations for change, and then they're going to have to change. And as I said earlier, that is difficult. I don't want to make light of it. It is difficult to do something differently if you've been doing it for 25 years, you've been wasting the public's money for 25 years, and now you're told you can't and you have to behave differently. That's a challenge for people.
All right. Well, Lance, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll look forward to following up with this in the near future, because I feel like this has been an ongoing thing since we've been doing this show. Every year we have to keep having this conversation. So thank you for keeping that going.
Thank you. And I will say, just for Denise's benefit, go Phillies.
All right. Thanks so much, Lance.
Thank you.
Now, Denise, you were speaking to somebody today. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. On Saturday night, an organization called Philadelphia Legacies is having its annual fundraiser. And what it does is they do portraits of Philadelphians of note. Like this year's portraits include former Sixers great Wally Jones, the late Cecil B. Moore, who, if you're a Philadelphian and you don't know who Cecil B. Moore is, we got to have a conversation. Let's just say that the station at Temple University is not named after this guy for nothing. You have Phil Martelli, the former coach of the St. Joe's. They weren't Owls. They were Hawks, yes. Because I remember one year the Hawk and the Owl got into a fight during a St. Joe's Temple game. That was hilarious. But these portraits are painted in honor of these people. They're given to the honorees, and then the honorees are allowed to hang them somewhere that is synonymous with them and with their contribution to the city. Like, for example, the late John Chaney, the coach at Temple University, the longtime basketball coach at Temple University, his legacy's portrait is hanging at Temple University. And you have like Trudy Haynes from the first African-American woman, to be a television reporter on CBS 3. She got a portrait one year. It's what they do is they put these portraits together as a means of helping to show people and to pay tribute to these folks who have done great things in the city, and also to kind of, allow folks to learn about these folks. Because Chris interviewed Phil Martelli on his show last Saturday. And if you weren't like a hardcore college basketball fan in the late 80s, in the late 90s, early 80s, late 90s, you probably wouldn't have known who Phil Martelli was or why he was important. But if you were, a college basketball fan here in Philly around that time, or if you were at Temple University like me, you paid attention to St. Joe's because they were one of those teams in the Big Five. And we're not going to talk about the Big Five because the Big Five triggers me, kind of like the Baltimore Colts moving to Indianapolis triggers Chris. You had this group of 5 schools that played each other, and it was always like a big deal and sellout crowds and everything like that. So this weekend on Saturday, they're having their annual banquet at the Taj Mahal, which is on Hunting Park Avenue. Now, tickets they're not cheap. They're like $300 a piece. But the reason why they're so expensive is because this fundraiser allows them to do work throughout the year that continues on the work of, letting people know about these folks who have a legacy here in Philadelphia. And also they do work with children, and they do work, they do the kinds of work that we talk about here on Hall Monitor as preventing a lot of problems that, idle hands would have, if something like the Legacies Foundation wasn't around. Now, my intent was to have Steve Sattel, the person who was in charge of Philadelphia Legacies, talk to you, because I did an interview with him today. Unfortunately, the gremlins that have been bugging us technically off and on during this show, they had fun with me this morning. Either that or it was just I can't figure out how to shut off the recording on my Zoom, when it says, recording in progress, and there used to be a red button that says stop, and that button doesn't exist anymore. So that's kind of why Mr. Sattel isn't telling you about this himself, but we'll try to have him on at another time to talk a little more in depth about the Philadelphia Legacies and also Building Bridges, the organization that is kind of like the parent company for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's an interesting program. And when we're talking about basketball, there's something we can avoid.
As much as we would like to.
As much as we would like to, because I feel like this has been an ongoing discussion. The 76ers arena.
Yes.
I've gone through these reports, and we've been getting a lot of information about these reports, Denise, from all different sides. Is there anything that, not necessarily just about the reports, but in the way, and this is what's been surprising to me, maybe it shouldn't be surprising, but just what has stood out to me about the way these reports are being interpreted by people on both sides of the issue?
Yeah, and it's weird because the Sixers came out after the reports were issued saying, oh, this is good news for us. But when you read the report, you're like, how? Because basically what the report is saying is, which is, while your design is good, your community impact, not so much.
Yeah.
And the community impact is kind of where the rubber meets the road. Earlier today, and I'm not sure if you were sitting in on this too, Larry, but earlier today, the folks at Save Chinatown unveiled a political poll that was taken by Cornell Belcher. Now, if you're a political junkie like I am, you know who Cornell Belcher is. Cornell Belcher is the pollster that handled the poll, was the pollster for former President Barack Obama, and he does a lot of polling in inner city environments, and particularly when it comes to the Black vote. He's really, really well known and really respected. And he did a poll to find out what voters thought about the city, now about the 76th place. Now, I have a problem with it being less than 1,000 voters being surveyed. It was only like 791 voters. But most of those voters are not in favor of this new stadium. And then, just to make it interesting, yesterday, Comcast Spectacor gave its blessing to a plan that would turn the top 2 floors of the fashion district into an eds and med space for innovation rather than
turn left field. Yeah.
Yes, rather than turn it into a stadium. Now, anyone who is, listen to anyone from Comcast Spectacor talk about the prospect of the Sixers building a new stadium downtown is not at all surprised by this. Because if you thought that Comcast Spectacor was going to keep its mouth shut and possibly, lose a large chunk of money that the Sixers represent, or have to fight for that money in terms of concert hall revenues for the Wells Fargo Center, you've not been paying attention to Comcast.
Yeah.
But it was kind of surprising that they came out of the blue with this proposal.
And, Denise, I talking about that poll, we know the polling firm is legitimate.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And I want to give you the result of this here. Support for the proposed Center City Arena. The people who are neutral, who don't know or aren't sure yet, 26%. The people who oppose, 56%, and the people who support 18%. I was surprised by those numbers. I thought it'd be closer to even, but we're way off on that.
And that is why I have an issue with only 700 people being over, like a little over 700 people being polled here.
Mm-hmm.
Because just from my own anecdotal listening to people, the unions alone are more than 18% in favor of this.
Mm-hmm.
If you just ask union people that live in the city, that's more than 18% all on its own. And the fact that you have 26% that are undecided, I'm not sure about that either.
Right.
It's probably more than 26% because let's face it, unless you live in Center City or in Chinatown, you really don't care about this. Not at the level that people would like you to. In fact, if you remember, we interviewed Judith Robinson from North Philadelphia a few months ago, and I asked about the Sixers stadium, and she didn't even want to answer the question. She was like, they need to deal with their own thing. We're going to deal with ours. So that kind of surprised me a little bit.
Yeah. Still, when you look at these numbers, even if, and I agree with you, 1,000 is kind of the benchmark, I think, for a poll of this, for this kind of thing. I'm still surprised by those numbers, though. And I do agree that they're probably not exactly where they, where you think they would be.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still, I would still say that, I would believe a majority of people are opposed to this. Not just because of the poll, although the poll, helps inform that decision, but the things that I've been hearing, the people I just talked to, and some of this is anecdotal, I'm going to admit that. But my neighbors are, have asked me, because they know we've been following this, why are they doing this? Why is this going to happen? What sense does this make? And, you kind of go, the reports have kind of suggested that, that there doesn't seem to be a tremendous amount of upside here.
Well, the only group for whom there is an upside are the owners of the Philadelphia 76ers.
Yeah.
Now, would I like to see them invest that money in putting a team on the floor that can get out of the second round of the NBA, the NBA playoffs? Yeah, because that makes more sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of people are starting to sour on stadium development and the big reason is all you have to do is go across the bridge to Camden, which is why when the governor of New Jersey said, we'll give you $400 million in tax breaks to go to Camden, everybody who is from New Jersey just looked at him and said, looked at that and said, that's not going to be enough money because Camden already has the New Jersey State Aquarium, the BB&T Auditorium, and parts of Rutgers Camden University that were supposed to benefit people in Camden. They were supposed to produce jobs. They were supposed to do all of these things. And out of the hundreds of jobs that were promised, there are approximately 11 Camden residents that work in any of those venues. And that includes the Sixers practice facility. So I think that's why a lot of people are starting to sour on these things.
Well, and the other side of it too is, and I think this is a point Lance had made one time, that if you're going to build an entertainment facility, the ones that generate the most revenue for the dollar are like smaller music halls and things like that.
Like the Met.
Mm-hmm. And even smaller ones too, from my understanding, because they, for their imprint and the amount of money it took to get them, that they're able to generate, a reasonable amount. Sports arenas usually don't. Now, I know we're right up against it here, and I hate to stop it there. We're going to talk more about this next week and in the subsequent weeks. We have a lot going on with this. So we'll be back next week on Hall Monitor.